So we move on to the next cult of personality. Dean Clifford. At the same time, we'll say I met Kevin in October of 2011. In July of 2011, if I'm not mistaken, Dean Clifford hit the scene. And he was explaining legalese in a way that I could finally understand it. And so I started to really talk to him an awful lot. And I believed in his anger. My God, was he angry and passionate. And he felt like a brother who was in it for the same reasons, even though he'd been, had a longer history or whatever the case was. Now, I was like a press secretary for him. I was the very first radio show that he ever came upon. And I began to go more towards sovereignty and drop everything else that I was working on, which in hindsight wasn't smart, but it was what it was. Now, I organized a seminar in Hamilton for him with some other people we worked on. That was insanity. And it brought him in quite a bit of money, but there was a struggle. He had wanted to make a lot more money from it, and I had said that people don't have the money, and that we shouldn't be charging more than $30 because people just can't afford it. And he agreed, and I think that was because it was the only way that I would be involved, is to understand that other people are not rich. That being said, the next seminar was in Toronto the following year, and he came and stayed with us at just before Christmas time, I think. And then again in January, he didn't stay with us, but we went to a hotel in Toronto for another seminar. So there was a lot of time getting to know this individual, so we thought, or getting to know the persona he wanted us to know. He said a lot of things and did a lot of things that were opposite to what he said. I started to see that later, but I noticed certain things. He wanted to compare my relationship to my husband to the relationship that he had with his wife. These are all grooming techniques, trying to compare yourself to somebody else, showing them that you're very similar and that you've gone through the same battles is a way that they work to groom you, to gain your trust, because then you feel kin to them. And he said to us on one of his last visits that he stayed with us. And I will say that Kevin Ann had also stayed in our home. I actually went to go meet these people. I broke bread with them. I stayed within their space. They stayed within ours. I know because I experienced. While most people are just watching on the other side of a screen, I lived it. Now, on one of the last times that Dean had stayed with us, he had told us about this farm that he had, and that he finally knew why he'd been holding on to it for so long, because he hadn't done anything with it. And he had 9 properties because he was such a fantastic construction worker doing really good business that he was wise with his funds. And we believed this. Wholeheartedly, we believed this. Wholeheartedly, we saw pictures and we saw papers and we saw mortgage contracts, and he had property. And it was a farm. And it needed work. And I had told him that as a mother and one that was homeschooling my children, I didn't have the time to dive into the legalese the way that he was. and that there will always be people like him out there doing it, and that there will always be people like me that will help to get the word out. And that was my role in this, and that was the role that I was willing to accept. Now, if you remember from a few minutes earlier, 2 weeks later, my family had received a letter from Family and Children's Services saying that they wanted to see the children and interview them. And then I went on the fight for my life and wrote a letter and got help. I wrote the letter on my own. Dean Clifford looked it over, fixed a few things, not many, because I actually did the work on my own. And at the end of it, I gave credit to so many people, but the credit did lie within me because it was my courage, my intelligence, my research that led to that letter. And I was supported, and I didn't give myself enough credit for that. Again, part of the enabler gives credit where credit is not due and doesn't take enough for themselves. That happened, and we survived it, and the case was closed because there was no reason. My children are happy, healthy, well-loved, well taken care of. There was no interview. I saw this as a big win. Everybody did. Dean kept saying that we should move, and his plan and what he was doing was we would be living on a life lease on this property and create a farm and be able to bring things to farmers markets, and I would be able to do my wild foraging and all kinds of things. There was a post office that he was going to buy outright. It was a cafe, post office, coffee shop, all in one, that he was working to buy. And right until we were on the road, the deal was closing, and that's where we were going to live, or on the farm. When we got to Winnipeg, oh, this is the thing. We finally convinced ourselves that this is a good move. We should take this chance. Why not? What is here for us? We left our house, basically handing it over to the bank. We left our home. We packed up and we moved. And I'm going to say that I don't regret it, for the lessons, for the adventure, for the closeness that it brought my family. I have no regrets, but it doesn't take away from what happened. Halfway to Manitoba, we were told that, oh, the deal fell through. You're going to have to stay at a house in the north end of Winnipeg, which I had no idea what that would be about. I had no clue what the north end of Winnipeg was all about. That it's not the safest area of that city to live in. But we rolled with the punches and we said, okay. He did, after all, own 9 properties. We'd be all right. So we went to the address, followed the GPS. He warned me that he hadn't had the time to clean it. And so I expected that I had to wash floors, steam clean carpets, wash walls, that kind of thing. Normal. I didn't expect much. When my family and I entered the house, I collapsed on the floor in tears. The upstairs toilet was coming through the kitchen ceiling. The entire living room carpet had been used as the outside grass for a dog, and the smell and stench of urine filled the entire house. The front door was held shut and locked, I suppose, by a 2x4 screwed in to either side of the door because it had been busted open. We were told by a drunken brother-in-law, or the drunken brother of his girlfriend at the time. The upstairs was disgusting. There was feces smeared all over the bathroom, blood all over all of the walls. And my husband, in that moment, almost left all of us for reasons I won't speak on air. But to no good ends, I assure you. We went to Dean's house. Dean said he was going to calm my husband down, calm us down, that he was sincerely sorry that he hadn't been there and had only been understanding what the condition of the home was actually secondhand, because he was too busy working on the farm and on other real estate deals and his construction company. He was very sorry. We went to his house. We ended up staying there for days, and then a crew of us, my family, my husband, him, and another fellow by the name of Darren, all went, and not his brother Darren, another Darren from Quebec, or Hull. And we cleaned everything, steam cleaner, which I paid for, he didn't pay for. And then he told me that I'd have to, this would just be temporary until the farm was ready. And I was looking at the bright side of everything and wanted to believe in this. And I was still enabling him because he was so busy. He couldn't get to these things. And he's doing such good works, and he's answering so many emails, and he's got so many demands on him that it was okay. We could survive this. My husband, he had said he wanted to show the ropes of everything in his construction business so that he could take over for him when he had to go and do seminars and whatnot, or had to travel to help people get out of jail and yada, 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 yada. What did we find out? When we finally went to the farm, we found that he had life leased it to another family, that it was never intended for us. We wouldn't even be working on it for gardens and vegetables and things. Although we did put our work into it. I put a hell of a lot of work into it. I remember him going on about being able to transform myself into an attractive female while acting like a guy in the field. Because I'm not afraid of work, and I'm not afraid of hard work. And I found that curious. And then I started noticing things in his character. He was telling everybody that he was a fruitarian or a vegetarian, and yet he only consumed meat. He was telling everybody to not shop at corporate stores and only grow your own food and all of this, but he would put out there he was shopping at all the corporate stores, and he wasn't shopping with local farmers. He wasn't working with local farmers. He wasn't doing any of the things that he said he was doing. None of the things that he told us was true. My husband started working for him. I come from a family of construction workers. Not all of them, but my father built our homes, refinished our homes, redid our homes, did tons of construction. I have an uncle who's a construction worker. Let me tell you something about construction workers. They are up before the sun, and they are on the site just as it rises, and they work their asses off. This is what I know about construction workers. Dean Clifford didn't get out of bed until noon. Dean Clifford never did any work at his construction sites. He was letting them all go to bankruptcy. 9 properties, all tied up. Then we found out that he had a private investor. He had no money coming in. He wasn't paying my husband. My husband sat and talked to him and said, okay, we came out here. You promised us a certain quality of life. You said that this is the way that it was going to be, and this is not the way that it is. So now I have to go and find a job that will pay for me. And Dean said, no. I will pay you $500 a week, cash. He was actually paying me for the work that I was doing while he trained John. I was cooking all of their meals. Dean had said he was going to contribute to groceries because I was feeding everybody. I was feeding him, I was feeding Darren, I was feeding my family. And then when I called him on it and said, we could really use some help with groceries because you're eating with us every night, he said, well, you'd have leftovers anyway. You might as well just give them to me. Even though leftovers meant dinner the next day or lunch the next day or whatever the case was. Potluck Fridays when we throw everything together and that's dinner. He had told us to put the hydro in our name. I called the hydro company and they said there was a huge outstanding bill. Thousands, tens of thousands of dollars outstanding at this location. I said that I was not aware of any of that because I truly wasn't, and that I was trying to put it into my name. They assured me that it was put into my name. It was just a phone call that needed to be done. So I did everything that I was told to do to switch that over into my name. I was not asked to come in to sign anything. The hydro company said that they had taken care of it. I had no idea how bad the arrears were, though. And not just with the hydro. It was also with the water. Then I started having people coming to try and serve him papers. And they were rude and they were mean and they were nasty. But I believe so much in the whole sovereign freeman movement that he was spewing that I enabled him. And anything that I was believing in, I was putting at the back of my head. Then I started talking to people that knew him. And I mean people that knew him, that have been friends with him, that have watched him, that have worked with him. And I found out that there was an actual network of people working on the legalese front that had worked with him and that had stopped working with him because of the fact that they said there was no way that you were bringing in this into the public view via seminars that you were going to make money off of, and he did just that, and they cut him off at the knees. These people have binders and binders of wins and know what they're doing, and they cut him off because he had no honor, no integrity. He had called people in from out west who ended up in jail because of him. A chiropractor who was doing really well with her case that I won't get into. You can go looking for all of this, though. Decided to trust Dean Clifford at the last minute of her court case and ended up in jail. And so did he. We couldn't ignore things anymore. He had no work ethic. He was not honest, and about the smallest things, but then there was the final straw. We celebrated our birthdays together. They're like 2 weeks apart or something to that effect. He got very drunk, and he started shooting guns in the air, which was crazy. I was raised by a man who was a hunter and had nothing but respect for his firearms. And there are just things that you don't do, and if you do them, you're a fool. You do not deserve to have these weapons at your disposal. They're for hunting. They're for protection. They're not for drunken escapades. Well, during this drunken escapade, he looked at me and he said, "Don't worry, Cari. Your children don't have any of your dirty gypsy blood. Because plants, it takes them 5 generations to become pure again. And as both of your children are blonde-haired and blue-eyed and come from an Irish, Scandinavian, or Norse father, you'd be good to know that your dirty gypsy blood is no longer within them, and they've been cleansed." Not only had I fallen for all of this other bullshit, but now I was in line with a racist. So we started talking to people, and the same person that helped me, that had come from Ontario at the time, started to see things as well, and my husband was ready to snap, to put it mildly. Now, when I went to certain people to tell them what I was seeing, to talk to them about the fact that there was this private investor, that there were 8 properties owned, that I didn't see where the money was coming from because no work was actually being done. There was no work ethic. Lie after lie after lie. There was no fruitarian, no vegetarian. It was a meat eater that was lying to everybody. That person turned around and protected Dean. There's no safe place when you tell people the truth. So Dean ended up out west, and he got his truck seized by the RCMP. And I confronted him about all of these things that were going on, and there's a lot more to the story that I'm not going to be public about because it crosses a line of what can be used against him and the fact that I'm not a rat. That being said, we had told some Good Samaritans what had happened. A friend of ours had told them, and they rescued us. I won't even lie about it. They rescued us because they couldn't believe that this was being done to a family. It had been done to other people, but he was doing it to a family, sickened them. So they rescued us. And in the time that they rescued us, we still had all of our stuff at this ghetto home that was falling apart and disgusting. But we were camping, literally. That's what our rescue was, camping. And it was better than where we were living. And what ended up happening was our power got shut off and our water got shut off. And I couldn't understand why, because I had made arrangements. But see, the arrears was so great that the city wasn't putting up with it. Hydro wasn't putting up with it. They were not allowing him to continue. And he still to this day is saying that it's our bill, when we did everything that we could within our means to correct it. The real problem was the tens of thousands of dollars that he was in arrears for. But he still wants to use us as the scapegoats and say that it was our issue. We were there for 2 months. There's no possible way that in 2 months, tens of thousands of dollars were our responsibility. Now, when I went out to tell people what was going on, nobody wanted to believe me. And everybody would rather say things like, oh, he must have denied her sexually. Are you kidding me? I'm sorry. I stood with my husband and Dean in front of me. I would never choose Dean. Why does everybody go to those assumptions? Why can't anybody see that a couple is really allowed to love each other monogamously, fully, completely, without there being anything sordid, and that maybe, just maybe, we enabled a con man? A con man that tells people that he had a house fall on top of him, and that was when his great epiphany happened. Have you heard this story? Many have. The truth is, the house fell on somebody else. The truth is that for 15 years he's been dodging paying the insurance for this person's life that was ruined because he had no insurance, and he's been running from that ever since. There was no house that fell on his back. It fell on someone else's, and he took no responsibility for it. He's never taken responsibility for anything, and he's blamed everybody else for every problem he's ever been in. Does it sound like I'm doing the same thing? 'Cause I'm not. I'm owning it. I made these bad choices. I don't regret them because I learned. I was able to report back. Whether you want to believe me or not is not my karma. It's yours. I've had death threats because of what I've said. I've been called various names because of what I've exposed. So many people don't want to believe it. They want to believe that I'm quote unquote batshit crazy. And that's fine. If it's easier for you to believe in a cult of personality type than it is to believe a wife and mother who lived the experiences that you're all staring back at through your computer, then so be it. This is not for you. This is for the people who know that they enable too. This is for the people that see that they make mistakes, that they're still learning, and they have no problem admitting to it. This is why I am doing this, to let you know it's okay. Again, my editor, Justin Jewski at Lifting the Veil, shh, Cari, don't say anything. You're going to destroy everything we're working for. People will never accept it. You're going after one of your own. And I bought into that. And I allowed that to happen. Instead of exposing it all exactly as I should have, exactly when I should have, I let somebody else steer me. Why would somebody so interested in providing truth want me to shut up about these things? Shouldn't people know the lives of these men? Shouldn't people know what it is they're doing when nobody's watching? Shouldn't people know what they're aligning themselves to? And let me just say, the last three, all sexual predators. Every single one of them thought they could somehow get into my pants. Shame on you all, you disgusting, vile creatures.